Well, gosh, what a challenge getting on live today. Oh, but I'm here. And if you're here with me, I hope you will enjoy and participate. I'm going to go through a bunch of things. I am Gail Hamlin, a homeschooler of almost 30 years, and I love being able to share the world and their understanding of it with my children and others. So, my story is that I was born in England, raised in Brazil and Montreal, and I went to boarding school at 8 years old when my family lived in Montreal. So, 5,000 miles away from my family. Maybe that contributed to me wanting to homeschool my kids. So, when we talk about homeschooling, the term itself can cause fear, excitement, the unknown, or presumptions. So, in my long experience, I have met and had met people that had most of those confusing, different feelings and all the unknown feelings, or thinking you know what it is because you've heard somebody else say something. Um, and so you automatically think you know what it is. I want to share a quote with you from my mentor, John Taylor Gatto. If you don't know who he is, I highly recommend you Google him and pick up his the first book called Dumbing Us Down on Amazon. It will change the way you think about learning forever. If you don't want the way you've thought about education changed, then that's okay. I have often thought it's a red pill, blue pill kind of thing. Um, I'm going to put this up in the show because you can be a guest with me. Ask questions. Tell me if you've been homeschooling for a long time, what works for you? What doesn't? What are the challenges? If you're just thinking about homeschooling, come on, ask your questions. Let everybody have a go at helping you out because we are all here to help each other. So, talking about definitions brings me to back to where I started because when I think about school, my understanding of school growing up was very different than a lot of people's. I was raised by my grandfather, who was a scientist, who, as I've said on another show, he had no greater than a grade six equivalent of education in England, and yet he received an honorary degree from Harvard in technical excellence. He invented many things that nobody will know that he invented because whoever he was working for at the time, he gave the credit to that company or that agency. So I was homeschooled, unschooled by this brilliant man with a photographic memory. So learning to him was experiential, totally. School, it had to meet some pretty high criteria for him to accept it. And that's what makes all of us important because all of us have a different perspective depending on what our experiences are. So, what do you think about the word school? Does it make you happy because you really enjoyed school, or does it make you afraid? We lost a very valuable person in the world this week, and I'm sure lots of others, but um, Sir Ken Robinson, if you don't know him, please Google him and watch the things that he did. Ken Robinson passed away from cancer unexpectedly, and no less than a month ago, he was doing YouTubes with families who were going through COVID schooling and helping them express their concerns and answer those questions. Um, Highly recommend you go onto YouTube and find Sir Ken Robinson's Learning podcast. He interviews people who are working full time and trying to manage and juggle everything. So I'd like to give a huge thank you to Sir Ken Robinson because he brought so much enlightenment to a lot of us. So now, getting on to some of the things that we didn't talk about last week. Last week, I had some wonderful guests, and I had a couple of guests lined up for today, but that didn't work out. So we're just going to do this together. So please, if you have a question or a comment, please put it in the comments so that I can uh, answer, point in a direction, or address concerns. One of the concerns that I've seen a lot on the lists and on the groups is when and how do I send a letter of intent? That terminology has been bounced around a lot. And a letter of intent is something that's described by a policy that the um, Ministry of Education helped the boards create, called Policy Memorandum 131. If you go to ontariohomeschool.org, you can see that. You can also Google it and find it. That's where the terminology of a letter of intent comes from. That policy is not the same as the law. Now, I'm not giving you legal advice because I'm not a lawyer, but the policy in the boards has a lot of very intimidating language. And I've heard a lot of people say how they are intimidated. They sent in a letter of intent and they thought that that would be it, that that's all they'd have to do. And then they've received back pages and pages and pages of requests for information telling them that they might get inspected or to provide a list of curriculum or an outline of what you're going to be doing with your child. Because sadly, the presumption is that if you are not compelled or coerced to do something beneficial in educating your children, then you won't. Sadly, a lot of very wonderfully intended people don't trust parents, where the parents are the ones that have the primary responsibility for their children and the primary invested, the paramount invested in their children. If there are always going to be those exceptions to the rule. So, getting back to the letter of intent, nowhere in the Education Act Does it request or require a letter of intent? The Education Act simply says in Section 21 2A, a person is excused from attendance at school providing they are receiving satisfactory instruction, or not providing, sorry, so, um, as long as the child is receiving satisfactory, or if the my brain just went dead. I'm trying to do it off of memory again. I have it right here, so I'm going to read it. A child, used to say a child, they did change the terminology to a person. So a person is excused from attendance at school if the child is receiving satisfactory instruction at home or elsewhere. That's the part that applies to parents. When the parent excuses the child from attendance at school, which is the appropriate way, it is the parent that excuses a child, not the school, not the board, not the principal, not the ministry. It is the parent. However, many people in the education system have been taught through their job descriptions and what they've been told is that the superintendent excuses a child from attendance at school. That's simply not the case. They may have presumed that responsibility, but it is not an actual responsibility that they have, or a right that they have to excuse your child from attendance at school. The parents excuse their children from attendance at school. So technically, if your child has never been to school, never been registered in a school, you do not need to do anything. That school never needs to be informed. You are always the primary person responsible for your child. So if you have had your children registered in the school previously and you are removing them, it is simple politeness to say, listen, my child won't be coming anymore. That is you excusing your child from attendance at school. Now, the boards of education and the Ministry of Education have a responsibility to its citizens, of which you are. And I want to explain this in the terminology of the Education Act and the education understanding. Compulsory education means that the state or the government is compelled to provide education for its citizens, not the other way around. Compulsory education does not mean that you are compelled as a parent to make use of or take advantage of the education that the government is providing. So, thinking about that, then, everybody in the government system of education is taught that they are responsible for the children that are registered with them. There have been situations that I will happily talk about on a Zoom that I'm going to be doing after this. If you'd like to join me for that Zoom, I'll make sure I put the Zoom link in the comments. In fact, I may be able to get it now, but the fact that the people in the system are taught one thing And the law actually says another thing. Um, that's why it's confusing. When people say, you know, when do I put in a letter of intent? Who do I send it to? I've seen people on the homeschooling groups asking, what address do I send this to? What email? Does anybody know the contact for this person? If this is required, wouldn't you think that they would have made sure that every single parent knew that information and had a uniform form to send in? Wouldn't it be organized? Wouldn't they have all this ready? Some people are getting these pages and pages of requirements that are dated from 2008 because sadly, there is a lot of confusion in the government and ministry side as well, and the boards of education, the schools. It's been chaos for them as well. So I understand that chaos impact your stress. It when you're trying to get answers to your questions to try and do the right things, what what am I required to do? What do I have to do? Because we're used to that. We're used to having to do as we're told and follow the rules. And that's what good citizens do, which is wonderful. It's fantastic that we are respectful, especially in Canada, right? I mean, all Canadians are told that they're so polite. So we're trying to do the right thing. But when you don't know what your rights are and what the right thing is, and there's no clear answer, what do you do? Well, you ask somebody, right? Well, one person tells you one thing and another person tells you another thing, and then a third person tells you a third thing. What is the truth? And that can be really stressful. Um, I'd really love to see some questions in the comments because even on the replay, if you're joining us live, that's awesome. Please put a question in there. Put a comment. If you're homeschooling already, tell me why you chose to homeschool because that's one of the most important things. Crisis schooling, COVID schooling, and homeschooling are really not the same thing, although they look very similar. Homeschooling is a process and a pedagogy that people come to because it's the right thing for them. In COVID, everybody's been thrust into this, and you haven't had much choice, right? This is it. This is what you're doing here. And a lot of families that are trying to do what they're told to do by the schools or whoever are struggling because school at home, well, if school didn't work at school, then why would it work at home? So I'm going to go through some of the questions that I've seen on some of the boards so that um, I can help people try and get a grasp. So, as I said before, if the letter of intent was required, it would be out there very publicly clear on who you send it to, when you send it to. They'd probably even have something online where you could click, to pick. Um, by now, they would have seen this coming, and it may have been better handled. So if you're removing your children from school and after all this time you've realized an epiphany, wow, this is way better than what they were doing in school. Um, it takes maybe 2 hours max to get done. Sometimes I've heard some people say as much of as what their children were doing in the whole week they've done in 2 hours on a Monday. Well, then the challenge is, what do I do? People ask, are they how do they entertain or keep their children busy? Um, I have somebody joining me on the Zoom. I don't know who yet, but there's there is a Zoom chat after this if you would like to ask questions more intimately instead of publicly out there. Um, so if you've realized that homeschooling is something that you want to try, even if it is temporary, let's say, you know what, I'm not ready to put my kids back in school right now because of, I don't want them wearing masks. I don't want them, you know, even doing the home learning. I don't want them on a screen for 5 hours a day. That's not, that's not good for anybody's brain, let alone a child. So, what do you do? Well, courtesy, as I said before, if your child's registered in the school, is to let them know that your child wouldn't be coming back. And that is excusing your child from attendance at school. When you do that, this whole new world opens up because you are no longer required to follow the government curriculum. All those things that the government has set up in its responsibility to provide education for its citizens, all that whole big um, creation, you are not required to do any of that. So what do you do? I'm going to get back to this. We have a question from Amy. Two boys, 3 and 4. Oldest is starting kindergarten this year, but we have decided to homeschool. Everything about it is so overwhelming. I realize JKSK is play-based learning. That that is good because I I feel so sad for the kids when the structure replaces the relationships. You've probably noticed how your kids act differently towards you as a teacher rather than just a parent. But I'm going to continue here. Um, some don't recommend following the curriculum, but I feel we need to have something to follow. Absolutely. Structure is something so important. I know my kids had a specific bedtime. We had a routine. Routines help us feel safe and secure. So having a normal routine so that you can say to a child who doesn't even understand time yet, it will be after lunch. If that child knows that lunch comes at a certain time each day and has gotten to know that, then that will be okay. Or after snack time, if you have a just an organized way of living. That's not to say that living off the cuff isn't great. It's great for some people, and some people are much better in that environment than in a structured environment. One way does not fit all. And this adventure is you learning what that structure looks like for your family and your kids. I was an avid unschooler. Let's just throw everything to the wind and go on adventures. And if I could have been a National Geographic adventurer with my kids in tow and them playing with orangutans, I would have been there absolutely. Um, but without something to follow, um, where he should be compared to the school kids. That is also another common question. You're not alone in worrying about this. Um, any information where to start planning to make routine schedule be great. This really is a different way of thinking. Yes, exactly. We want this, but so confused where to start. Thank you so much for commenting, Amy. Um, that's very true. And I'm going to take it one step at a time. So, we're talking about grade levels. You have the option, and I want you to hear me out on this because it is a completely different way of thinking. Grade levels were created for a specific purpose. You may think it was for learning, but historically, and you're welcome to look that up. It's it's not based on helping kids learn. It it is a scoring, um, labeling levels exactly for that, for structure and for keeping things organized. However, the way, the one way of grading that the schools have, which may work for some people, not saying it doesn't, are they right for you and your child? My daughter and many of the kids I know were in all sorts of grade levels. I had a 7-year old who was reading, she was tested, and they found she was reading and comprehending at a grade 11 level. But her spelling and her grammar were still at a grade 6 level. So, yes, being able to compare what those levels were. Now, I knew that not because she was tested, I knew that because I interacted with her every day. I communicated with her every day. And she and I, like a teacher in the school system, they watch and observe your kids. They get to know how they're thinking, how they're writing. That's why they can write a little note in the report card. They are observing your children and writing down their observations. What happens if your child learns more at home and then you put them back in school? Are they going to be able to work at that level that they've achieved? No. They are going to be put back in with the age level of child of class that they're in. And sadly, that does not help motivate them to continue learning. So children will be all over the map. Yes, I use grade examples to look at my children and see, oh, well, they're doing this, which is at this grade, and they're doing this, which is at this grade. So then I have a clearer picture. So the grade levels, don't try to fit your child into a grade level. Let the abilities be what's leading your child in learning, because that is what's going to help you more. Um, so think hard about what you're comparing him to? And why? Why compare him to what the government thinks he should be doing at his level? Because I guarantee it won't be what the other kids are doing at that level. All those kids will be all over the map, but because they're that age, they're in that grade. So really think hard about, why am I comparing my child based on a grade level simply because he's that age? If you're going to use the grade level outlines, which there are some wonderful ones, um, let me grab my favorite here. It is typical course of study. This is not the Ministry of Education outline. It is from the World Book Encyclopedia, and they, oops, no, wanted this. Ah, you get that back there. Okay, got that. Coming back to the studio. I'm going to put it in here. For the almost 30 years that I've been helping families and my own kids, I have five daughters and one son. We are a blended family because I was a single parent homeschooling, full time working mom for 14 years. Um, yes, I made that work. Sorry, that link is from a different account of mine, but um, that course of study is a grade level outline, and so you can just read through it and say, oh, the more you get to know your child and what they're doing, you can see, okay, well, if they're doing a grade 6 level, and that's absolutely possible. Like I said, my daughter was 7. She's not a genius. I would not say she's gifted. I would say that she had abilities that she loved. Stacy, yes, while I respect that the grade level is subjective with respect to learning to each child's abilities, how does this correlate with respect to the higher learning? Is there standardized testing for a child entering university that has been homeschooled? My concern is, if I don't follow a curriculum outlined, how will my child be received when applying to university? Excellent, wonderful question. And I am going to answer that. You do not need, now this is radical, and nobody else will tell you this. Like that, there are people that will tell you this, because I'm going to send you to a great link, two links actually, um, that will be able to answer that question for you. Um, and the first one is over here. I am so glad you asked that question. Um, University. I pick faster than my computer can enter in what I'm typing. Uh, Alrighty. It is universityadmissions.ca. This is co-written by a lovely woman that I uh, homeschooled with. Um, and Amy, you are very welcome. Anytime you can private message me on Facebook. I'm happy to help you answer and find the right thing that's for you, for your family, so that you can thrive and love learning together. This is an adventure. You're never going to get these years back again. Everything you do with your children, relieve yourself of the stress of following somebody else's requirements and allowing yourself to really help and love your kids and help them learn. I have, my parents are no longer around, and I've lost people I love. And now I would do things so much differently, because life is short and you want to enjoy every minute of it. Um, so getting back over here, I have put in the, oh, that's the other one. Sorry, I just entered the other, uh, that typical course again. So let me see if I can do this correctly now. This is universityadmissions.ca. Stacy, the learning ability has pro- no basis in the grade levels. You do not need a high school diploma or credits or grades to get into university. You simply do not. If you look at it, and I'm trying to find a good analogy, if there's a sale on at your favorite store and you're told when they line up or when the store will open and that people will line up, right? If you know somebody who works in the store or know the person who owns the company, is it not likely that you might have a better opportunity to get in before other people or instead of other people? I don't think that's a very good analogy, but it's the best I could come up with on a short notice. My daughter went to university at 13. Now, I specifically want to mention my own kids because they are my personal experience, but they're not the only experience that I have with this. One of the things I specialize in as a parent advocate is helping kids get into university and college without a university degree, with or out well, sorry, without a high school diploma. So I have helped a 12-year-old get into the actuarial sciences department at Western University in London. A 13-year-old got into the medical program. A good friend of mine's son, he started at medical school by being permitted to job shadow a neonatal surgeon because that's what this young man at 13 wanted to do. He memorized all the Latin names for the human body and all its parts, and he was passionate about what he wanted to do. There is no reason why the university would not beg him to be there. And he's done amazingly well. A 15-year-old, I assisted getting into the law department. I've helped a young woman get into the Navy in the United States. York University, English department. Um, that's one of the things I help kids without, especially unschoolers who don't grade, they don't do any of it. But the system is not going to want to tell you that because their jobs rely on bums in seats. Now, I'm not being mean. That's the reality. Is it's a business. I mean, all of our tax dollars go into it, and a child like per student funding, that's another big comment question on the homeschool groups is, make sure you register your child to do the learning outside if you don't want to send them to school so that the schools will get the funding. I kind of think that's fraud because your tax money is going to go to the Ministry of Education anyway. And yes, this is going to change the landscape of education everywhere in the world. forever. This, what's happened this year, has turned everything upside down, and not necessarily as a bad thing. It's helped a lot of families and parents regain their self confidence in being responsible for their kids' education. Um, I would like to read you a quote um, from a book that I have around the corner. Um, and I could almost, I'll paraphrase it for you. In 1847, the Right Honorable Robert Spence said that with the granting of free schools, which is what they called them, because we've only had government schools since 1871 in Canada. We had no government involvement in the schools before that. They were all privately orchestrated and didn't do too badly. So Robert Spence said that when you remove the responsibility of parents to pay for the education of their children directly, you will see an increased, um, sorry, a diminished interest in the schools and the education of their children. So if you think about it as, okay, we're giving this responsibility of educating our children to this segment of the government, and we're trusting them to do it right. We're trusting the government so we don't have to. So we can do our work, our children will be learning in the school, and we are separated from that. Now, there are a lot of great parents who are very actively involved in the school. How and but are they actively involved in curriculum planning? Are they involved in child psychology? Are they involved in how kids learn and improving the system? No. They're involved in hot dog days and pizza days and donating and volunteering, and it's not about our kids learning. Parents don't have that involvement. So that warning was put out there in 1847. Oh, I'm sorry. I I am up as high as I can be in volume. Stacy, thank you for letting me know. Um, yes, my numbers here are up as high as I can get them. But thank you for letting me know. Sadly, I left my microphone in the car, and my husband took the car, so I don't have my microphone. All right. So I hope that helped answer some of your questions, because um, as parents have learned to trust the government and the schools, they have also learned to distrust themselves, to lose self confidence in their abilities. And some educators and people have um, called it an abrogating their parental rights to the state, and being conditioned to think what a lot of parents think: I'm not trained to do this. I never went to teachers college. How am I supposed to know what to do? But we are intelligent. I had a paralegal mom tell me that she thought of herself as a moron when it came to teaching her own children. That's criminal. Criminal that she thinks that way. Somebody has helped enable her demeaning her own abilities as a parent. And that irritates me because I see potential in every child and every parent, and with love, nothing is impossible. I'm going to give you that other. Yes, thank you, June. Again, I'm trying to. I am up as high as I can be. Sorry for that volume issue. Thank you for mentioning it. Here's another. I'm going to try to raise my voice so that you can hear me better. Um, Here's another place on the internet that is fabulous. It's another link to getting to post secondary school when you've never been to school. It is unschooling to university. And it's a website primarily about a book that a Canadian woman, Judy Arnall, wrote and published, I believe, 2 years ago. And here is the link. Alrighty, there's the link. And I can share those links on the screen if you like to see them. But I know we're running out of time here. I am running a Zoom chat for anybody that's interested in chatting more after this. I don't want to take too long here. Um, there are so many resources, and I know it can be so overwhelming. Take a deep breath. My advice, the best advice that I can give to any homeschoolers or people struggling with what to do is take a deep breath. While getting a letter into the school about your decision is beneficial for them to know whether your children will be back or not, that is not carved in stone. Send a letter, just a handwritten note, even. You don't need a letter of intent. As I said at the beginning of the show, you can just handwrite a note saying that my children will not be returning to the school. I am excusing them from attendance. You don't even have to mention homeschooling because, as far as the school is concerned, that could mean you're moving. It could mean you're putting them in a private school. It could mean you're homeschooling. And if they want to contact you, I would highly suggest putting, if you wish more information, please communicate with me via correspondence. They are under so much stress right now, trying to know how many kids are coming. They all have paperwork to do for the ministry, and that is how they get their funding. So if you can, if you let them know then not to expect your children, then they don't apply for that funding. If you get something in addition to that, like a longer piece of paper, you are not required to do anything with that. Once you excuse your children from school, they from attendance at school, they are excused. That's it. That's all done. Um, okay, so now getting this link to you. Paste. All right. And then have two computers going here because I had technical difficulties. So I have to switch from, this keyboard for that screen and this keyboard for this screen. And it's a little crazy. We got some more messages here. I hope that helped. And please check out those websites because the options are endless. And rather than being stressed out about that, don't rush. Take your time. Your children will not suffer a grade level or they will not miss anything. They will probably learn more from seeing you look into this. You're the primary example. They learn to speak from you. You help them take their first steps. When you are regulated and calm and looking at all the options in your own time, they will learn that is how to learn. All the kids I've worked with, hundreds of them, my goal has been to help them learn how to learn, not just stuff. I went to that typical course of study when I got, you know, out of ideas. And, I like giving my kids the chance to be bored because that's when their minds came up with the most creative things. I love the way my youngest daughter writes, the words that she puts together, the way she thinks about things. I would never find that out if she was at school being told to write a hamburger paragraph, you know, um, because she had the freedom to write whatever she wanted. I want to also share with everybody my favorite quote. This is my um, saying goodbye for now until next week, which hopefully I should have everything worked out. And it worked out fine last week. I don't know what happened this week. Um, the quote I will leave you with is from George Bernard Shaw. I am not a teacher. I am just a fellow traveler of whom you have asked the way. I pointed ahead of myself as well as of you. Take that with you this week and forever, and be that fellow traveler with your child. Enjoy your week, and I'll put the Zoom link in the comments. Have a great week, everybody, and thank you for commenting. Bye.